We are with Jud Spena of Binghamton, New York on May 17th, 2021. And we'll be speaking with Jud about the Squires Junior Drum and Bugle Corps. So thank you, Jud, for agreeing to speak with us.
My pleasure.
I have a list of questions, but our conversation can wander as much as we want. The questions are just a guide. If you think of something, don't hesitate to add to it.
Okay. You know I will.
Great. So first, just to kick it off, when you hear the word Squires, what is the first image, word, or memory that just pops into your mind?
Holy cow. Fun, I guess.
That's the word, huh?
Yeah.
Fun. So how old were you when you first joined the Squires?
I had just turned 10. My fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Stamp, read an announcement that the American Legion was forming a drum and bugle corps. Excuse me. I actually didn't even know what that was, but as I think probably typical 10-year-old boy, I always wanted to march in a parade and put on a uniform, and I knew that was involved, so I wanted to sign up. Yeah.
Did you play an instrument at the time?
At the time, I was just starting we were in fifth grade, and that was when we started band. So not yet, but it was happening at the same time.
What year would that have been?
Fall of 1964.
And how long had the Squires been in existence at that time?
It was just being started.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you got in on at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you lived in Watkins Glen?
I lived in Watkins Glen, right on Monroe Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the process for joining? Did you just
Yeah.
show up and say,
Right.
here I am?
Yeah, we just showed up. In fact, I remember getting home from school that day, and I mentioned it to my parents, and they thought it was a great idea, and they knew what a drum and bugle corps was. And the following Saturday morning at the municipal building right on Main Street, upstairs they had a meeting. Somebody had lugged a record player there, and they were playing drum corps music on the record player, and there were some instruments being shown, and it was just for boys, and there were a whole gang of us, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50 guys there. And they described what it was like, and told us, the first practice is the next Saturday, and it was from 9 to noon. And when I heard that it was 9 to noon, I said there was no way I was going to do that, because I liked watching cartoons on Saturday mornings. But I got home and told my parents I wasn't going to join it, and they said, well, they had other ideas, let's put it that way. So I joined, and never regretted it, obviously.
I was going to say, that conversation set the rest of your life.
It really
in a
did.
way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So you were in fifth grade, you said.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you left
Well,
Squires?
I stayed with it all the way through, and back then a junior drum and bugle corps you could be a member of until you turned 21. So I was with it then.
All through college then?
All through college, and stayed on as an adult instructor through the winter of 1982, when the corps finally went out of business.
And you are the historian for the corps, aren't you?
Unofficial historian, yeah. Nobody else wanted the job.
So you didn't play an instrument when you joined.
Right.
What did you end up doing? What was your position? What did you play?
Yeah, well, I was signed up to start trumpet and band, so I played the soprano bugle, which is sort of a first cousin to a trumpet. Yeah.
All the whole time?
Yeah.
You must have been quite good
Well,
after all those years.
I guess something that sort of came natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is that what you ended up teaching? When
I
you
did.
I
Chose music as a career, went to college, majored in music, and I was a band director for 34 years, most of it in elementary school. Some high school, but most of it elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the Squires, sort of jumping ahead to the end, but the Squires really influenced your career.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It was another musical outlet that really inspired me, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you say that being part of the Squires also helped in leadership development for you as well as the other members?
Yeah. Especially in the later years, you get in a group that large and over a span of time, a summer season that lasts 8 or 10 weeks, you see these ebbs and flows of morale and accomplishment and that sort of thing, and it gives you a broad picture of how things, how groups progress. So you understand that it's not a straight line from point A to B. There's a lot of deviations, or if you're to graph progress with that kind of an organization, it generally goes up, but there are a lot of deviations in the graph. You start here, you're going to end up there, but in between a lot can happen. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the experience for me.
So the Squires was so much more than just the music.
Sure. Yeah. As the Corps evolved from being a group of really just little kids who were being showed a good time and teaching some discipline and learning a little music, and whatever happened above that was gravy. Then the competition became a lot more intense, and as that happened, I forgot where I was going with that. What was the question?
Well, we're talking about the Squires being more than music.
Oh, yeah.
And the ups and the downs and what you learned and the development.
Yeah. Well, as the competition became more intense, there's more need for more practice, and you really become you spend more and more time with this group of people, and it really becomes a very cohesive unit. And beyond the practice field, you're getting together after practice. Everybody's going out for ice cream or pizza, or even in the later years when, and keep in mind the legal age of drinking was 18 at the time. The older members, would congregate at the bars and that sort of thing, and a lot of conversation, and it became really all encompassing. It was really all-encompassing. And of course, in the very later years, the Corps was actually traveling 20 to 30 days over the course of a summer, where you're together with those people all that time. So yeah, very, very much a family type situation.
So the Squires was a summer thing. When would you start practicing?
Yeah. Well, in the early years, it was practice once a week, year-round.
Year-round, okay.
Yeah. But, being a drum and bugle corps, marches and parades, competes in field competition, that's all outside. So, that was dependent on the weather, which got going in the spring. There were years when there were year-round activities. The color guard used to compete in the winter, and that was done in gyms, high school gyms. And there were a fair number of indoor performances for the entire Corps too. Those would usually be in the early spring, to when the weather got good. Then drum corps went outside and practiced, learning their field routines, and naturally over the course of the summer, parades and field contests outside.
So how did you all reconcile, especially as you were older? How did you reconcile sports, jobs, other outside, friendships other than Squires members?
Yeah. Well, that's that changed over the years. Like I say, when we started, it was like doing anything else. You went to practice Saturday morning, and that was during the winter, and that was it. In the summers, you had events on weekends, and maybe a one night a week practice. So, life continued pretty much normal. You could do your school activities and all that, and that evolved to the point where there were maybe 2 practices a week, and all weekends. The weekends got tied up, and that evolved further to the point where the last few years there were lengthy tours and a lot more intense practice. So we were practicing virtually every night. In fact, the last seasons were probably a typical. One of the last 2 or 3 seasons would be 3 10-day trips, early July, late July, and in August to wherever the championship would happen to be. Just generally speaking, so we were not home 30 days out of that particular summer, and when we were home, it was daily practice.
Did the Squires lose or gain members in those later years because
Sure.
of the intensity?
Yeah. In a sense, it sort of became. I mean, there was no money involved, but you could call it professionalized. Kids that were in the drum corps in the early years did it on a casual basis. It was fun. It was something you did. And as it evolved to that more intense situation, the membership shifted from that casual membership to just people, just kids who were focused on being in the best situation they could be in, the best drum corps they could be in. So the casual members drifted away, sort of self-eliminated themselves, and the more serious-minded ones drifted to the corps, and so that changed. That whole fabric changed. Yeah.
Did it change the dynamic when you started seeing young
Yeah.
people coming in from outside
Yeah.
the Schuyler County?
Yeah, it changed in all sorts of ways. I don't know where I start there. It put a drain on the local support. Was harder to get, I guess you'd say. Let me put it this way. When we were young, we went door to door and sold things like light bulbs to raise money. And I can recall doing this as a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old and knocking on the door and say, would you like to buy light bulbs? It supports the Squires. And the general response was, oh, of course, yeah, we hear them practicing all the time, and we love the drum corps and all that. And when you fast forward 10 or 12 years, when most of the kids did not live in Watkins Glen, then knocking on doors was a little trickier and was harder to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
Also harder to have the volunteer support. When the kids were local, naturally all the parents, a majority of the parents got involved one way or the other, whether it was raising money or holding a fundraiser or even donations, that sort of thing. But as the membership became far-flung, that was a tough nut to crack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We really jumped ahead there.
We did, and I
Yeah.
didn't mean to.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
evolved.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something very happy.
Yeah.
Tell us again about that one competition where you left town and everything's normal, and you came back, and the welcome you received.
Yeah.
If you could tell us the date and
Sure.
lead up to.
Yeah. Well, let me back up to the late '60s when we. The big thing for drum corps is field competition, and in the late '60s, the Squires started getting involved in that, and we weren't very good, frankly. And in 1969, we managed to place last in the state, in the New York State. There were 20 drum corps in that particular competition, and we scored a 20, and we came in 20th place. So that created an impetus from the parents to say, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right, because this is no way to treat the kids. So they found people who could teach us to be a good drum corps. And fast forward 2 years to 1971, we were competing more in field competition, and we were getting better. And they decided to schedule a trip for us to Lynn, Massachusetts, near Boston, which in and of itself was just fantastic. So a bunch of kids from Watkins Glen, we were going to go on an overnight trip, a 3-day overnight trip. We're going to Boston. It was very exciting, and we were starting to get better, but we were going to compete in the Class B portion of it. And if we did okay, that was great. If not, it was just going to be a great experience. And so we got there not knowing what to expect. And it was a large stadium. It was very intimidating. And we did our best and scored a score in the mid-60s, I'll say. And we had to wait the entire day. As each corps would perform, they would announce the score. And the scores were adding up, and we were in second place, then we were in third place, and then late in the day we were in fifth place, and it was a 5-corps final. And the very last corps that performed was a corps from Connecticut. They were pretty good. And we had to wait for their score, and one of our instructors said, "You did a good job, don't expect too much." And they announced that corps score, and we had beaten them by a few tenths of a point. So we were, all of a sudden, this trip that was just going to be a good experience, holy cow, we're finalists in this contest. And the evening show, we actually moved up from fifth to third place. So we were elated. And again, this is Class B competition. It's nowhere near the big time for Drum and Bugle Corps, but it may as well have been the Super Bowl for us. So anyway, we enjoyed the rest of the weekend. We were inexperienced travelers. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe over the 3 nights anybody got 4 hours sleep total. I know personally, I don't think I slept at all the whole 3 days. But on the ride home, one of the directors said we were stopped at a rest area near Windsor, near here. And he said, we should get our instruments out and drums and flags out and perform when we get home. And we all thought he was crazy. Nobody dared say it, but you must be crazy. We're beat, and we've been on these buses for 6 hours and still 2 hours before we get home. Well, we get close to Watkins Glen, and one of the guys had a transistor radio and said, "Hey, I think I heard something about the Squires on the radio." We're in the buses. And then we got to if you know the area, we got to the Alpine Junction, and there was a few people there with a sign that said, "Welcome home, Squires." And everybody shrugged their shoulders, said, "Oh, that's nice." And before you know it, there were cars, there were a caravan of cars, and a little further down the line, the fire trucks appear, sirens blowing, and then state police, police car in front, a police car behind, escorting the Squires into town. We headed for the municipal building where we usually, right on Main Street, where we usually would we'd meet there to leave, and that's where they dropped us off when we got back from trips. But instead of going there, the buses did a U-turn at the foot of the lake at Captain Bill's and came back through town and went down to Lafayette Park, where we were flabbergasted to see hundreds of people, and they pulled the buses onto the 5th Street side of the park, and people had rolled out red carpets. There were tables set up with cakes and that sort of thing, and it seemed like all of Watkins Glen was there, and it was really the thrill of a lifetime. And as I've said, if you ask anybody who was in the Corps at that time, they will probably mention that as one of their best memories. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we happily got our instruments out and played through our routine, and we'll never forget.
So who arranged everything?
I guess the parents put their heads together and said, let's do something to welcome
started
kids.
The phone calls.
Yeah, phone calls. Wow. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah.
So this all shows how strong the community support was.
Yeah.
So you're talking about fundraisers. When we were going through the scrapbook, we noticed things like, what was it, a beer blast? A beer blast to raise money? And, and what were some of the other fundraisers?
Well, early on, we went door to door with things. I remember selling popcorn once and light bulbs. For that trip to Boston, we did a thing. The slogan was "Boostin' to Boston," although the contest was actually held in Lynn, Massachusetts, but there's no alliteration there. So one of the parents, Carol Franzese, I don't know if you know the name, she went down to the salt company, one of the salt plants, and got the empty salt cans, and got a gang of us together, and we taped paper around them that said "Booze from the Boston," and put them in every store on Main Street in Watkins and Montour, so people could put their spare change in them. Another thing we did, we held an ice cream social, and the Squires and the Pages played at Lafayette Park, and those were pretty successful. And also, on the same day as the ice cream social, there was a tag day, and so the kids were out on the street selling tags, and for whatever, $1, $2, that sort of thing. And one thing which will be a little hard to conceive of now is that actually the kids got out in all the intersections with their canisters, and as the cars went by, people would. I say that now because nobody in their right mind would allow their kids to be standing in the middle of the street. But I think for the most part there would be a few adults on hand to watch, but and maybe hold a sign that says "slow down." But it was very successful and raised money to pay for the trip. Yeah.
The no, gosh, you said something. You said that. Well, oh yes, I'm sorry. Did you have to pay? Was there a fee as a member?
There wasn't. For the last couple of years, we did have dues, membership fees. When we started taking lengthier trips in 1973, what we called a tour. We left Watkins for 10 days, and there was a tour fee. I think it was $50, $50.
Well, then that.
Yeah, and I don't recall if we had a specific fundraiser where you could like earn credit for that. I don't think we did. So every member had to come up with $50. Yeah.
So speaking of the tours, young people, preteen, teenagers, traveling on tour buses or school buses?
School buses.
School buses out of Schuyler County or more rural areas of Chemung or wherever they came from. Would you say that for many of these young folks, this was their first experience outside of their county, outside of the mall?
Definitely, sure. And even to back up before the tours, I can recall when in 1967, and remember the average age of the Corps at that time was probably 12 or 13 years old. I was a 12-year-old. And they gave us our schedule for the summer, and it said Buffalo, New York on it. And I was thrilled. And then I noticed it had 2 days, and that means we're staying overnight. And that was a thrill. And when we went to Buffalo, I mean, there are buildings that are what you might call skyscrapers and that sort of thing. So yeah, and it definitely was an experience for kids from a small town.
A good experience.
A great experience.
Just
yeah.
Opened their horizons, to use the cliche. And
yeah. And as the years went by, like I was describing, we traveled to Boston, and in the following summers spread out a little more into the Midwest a little bit. And we had contests in Philadelphia, Boston, out in Wisconsin. So places we'd never seen before. And then go even a few years further, and the 77 and 78, the Drum Corps International had its championship contest in Denver. So our traveling for those summers was like a 15, 17-day trip to Denver. And I very distinctly remember the buses, getting further west, and as the terrain flattens out, that was something. And then we got into Kansas, where you could look in all four directions and really no sign of human life other than the road in some places, and it's flat, and that was something else, And then as you approach Denver, it's flat, and you see these mountains, and that's stuff most of us had never seen before.
Right.
Yeah.
And certainly you were interacting with folks that you would not in
Yeah.
Schuyler County.
Right.
Was there much
Yeah.
interaction with other drum and bugle corps
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah.
So you were meeting kids different than yourselves.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a few moments?
There was that, not as much as you might think, especially in the later years as the competition became more intense. Virtually all of the time traveling was devoted to either travel or practice or performing. But in the early 70s, yeah, especially on a local level, you would go to contests or other performances and meet a lot of the kids from all over. And I know personally I'm in touch with a number of those people.
Wow.
Yeah, and in fact, it kind of goes full circle. You meet somebody as a teenager who was, in those days, they may have been from Owego or Corning or Elmira or even Syracuse or Rochester, and then you go out into your professional life, and many of them, like me, chose music as a career. So I met them as teachers in a school district across town, or somebody I'd run into at a music teacher conference, that sort of thing. People I've kept in touch with for a long time. Yeah, and there were a few marriages, inter-corps marriages.
Oh,
yeah, boyfriend girlfriend things, and yeah, it happened.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to talk about the end a little more. It became very intense, you said. This is the late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah.
Were there other factors that affected the end, which I hope, I'd like you to describe, but cultural factors, anything, I really don't know an example myself, but things happening in the world that took young people's attention away from participating in organizations.
Yeah, in a very general sense, yes. Well, if you go back to the 60s, what was there for girls to do? Girls could join the Girl Scouts, and they could get involved in music in school, but there wasn't much to do in the line of sports.
Right.
And for the boys, and this is an oversimplification, but for the boys it was football, basketball, baseball. Now, as those activities changed a lot, and you get into the 70s and Title IX, all of a sudden there is a lot of activity for girls in sports. And sports in general expanded from football, basketball, baseball to soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, swimming. I don't know what else. Did I say soccer? So there was a lot more going on. Gymnastics, that sort of thing. So there was a lot more for kids to do. So whereas joining the drum corps was the thing girls could do who didn't have anything else to do, and the guys could do if they weren't particularly inclined to, like I'll say, football, basketball, baseball. So in a general sense, yes, that happened. So the kids that were joining drum corps were kids just off the street in the old days, and in the later years, kids that were joining drum corps were kids who had a lot of music experience in school, who chose that path as opposed to the sports. So that's a big cultural thing. Although I'd say that probably the bulk of that took place probably late in the Squires' existence and afterwards. Though I think it had an effect. But I use that word professionalization. That changed. Whereas every little town had a drum corps in the 60s. And there were just 25, 30 kids doing that wholesome activity. Then as the competition revved up and the time commitment increased, then you just had the lay kid, the casual member was sort of self-selected out of the
Mhm.
activity, and that membership pool really shrunk. So Watkins Glen being a small town, the local membership got smaller and smaller, and the more far-flung membership became the majority, and that led to ultimately to the end of it. It just became impossible for Watkins
Too
Glen to support.
fragmented.
Yeah, and it got more expensive. The where it was 1 night a week practice and travel on the weekends, it was, and you had volunteer instruction. Instruction became all professional, and the requirements of that amount of travel, feeding kids, transportation, gas, owning buses, equipment became more expensive. All those things. I've said before, the Squires kind of became victims of their own success.
Mhm.
We got good and wanted to compete on that national level, but Schuyler County, Watkins Glen just couldn't afford it. You just couldn't do that in a small town.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Urban area organizations in more urban areas were able to maintain this.
Yeah. That is true. Organizations that had, how do I say this? I guess the urban part of it is one piece. It's also organizations that knew how to raise money. And some places, I know for a long time in California, the California Corps ran very successful bingo operations. That I mean, we're talking, tens of thousands of dollars to fund their drum corps. And they needed that money because to travel from California to where all the competition was in the Midwest and the East, it's quite a thing. Also, the more established corps had strong alumni support. Alumni support that would go back decades. But actually, that's typical, but it's not entirely typical of all the organizations because some of them were formed in the 90s. So that's a complicated question.
What's the scene like today in drum corps?
Well, as I've said, it's an exaggeration, but not that much of one. Up until the late 60s, every little town had a drum corps. Those have virtually all gone by the wayside. And there are, I'm going to guess, maybe 50 or so groups that call themselves drum and bugle corps these days. They are, to varying degrees, well-funded, although some teeter on the edge of bankruptcy or edge of existence, but they manage to, the best do manage to raise literally millions of dollars to keep themselves going, and recruit kids from all over. You could name any corps as an example, but I'll just say one of the top corps of the activity now is the Boston Crusaders, and they're an outfit that goes back to the 1940s. Started as a church drum corps, and then a community drum corps, and then they made it on the national scene and was able to make the transition from the locally based group to the modern example. Even though they're known as the Boston Crusaders, they hold their practices in Florida, and I believe they may do some activities in Texas. Those are areas where high school marching bands are much more active, much more intense than they are in the Northeast. So that's where the kids are. That's where they go, and that's where they get the kids. They're fortunate, and they do have a strong alumni that goes way back. And I was talking to a fellow about it once, and where do they get money? And the guy says there are a lot of people that were in that corps, guys like you and me, who did well in life. And he says, for an example, they had a board meeting at that time, and they needed a new vehicle, a new equipment vehicle, a semi truck. And there was a husband and wife there, and they looked at each other and said, "We'll take care of it." And they wrote a check for $100,000. And I don't know how typical that is, but those are the kind of dollar figures we're talking about. And the IRS has a thing called 990s. Nonprofit organizations have to file 990s, and you can access that information. And the Boston Crusaders have a multi-million-dollar bottom line.
That's what it's all about now.
Yeah.
So you've chosen to stay involved with your historian work and Facebook page, reunions and such. I wonder, what did you tell your children when they were growing up about your experience with the Squires?
Yeah, well, we did talk about it a lot, and when the kids were little, I was able to get away once in a while to go to a drum corps show by myself, or maybe Rebecca and I would get a sitter when there was a show nearby. And when the kids got to be 8, 10, 12 years old, there was a contest right next door in Endicott. And, well, let's try it. Let's take the kids to it. And they got to see it, and they fell in love with it. And so we planned a few family vacations around it. We took the kids to Boston when DCI held their championship in Boston. We were able to go to the aquarium and see the USS Constitution and some other things, and enjoy the drum corps. And likewise, it was in Pasadena one year. We went to Disneyland, and did drum corps, that sort of thing. I will say, and this might surprise you, we felt badly because it was a little like taking the kids to the candy store and not letting them have anything, because as they got older, they wanted to get involved, but it's just something we weren't willing to do with our family, especially if the oldest one wanted to go. It's all encompassing. What do we do? We'd have to turn our family inside out to allow that to happen. So we didn't do it.
Are there any drum corps in within, say, 100 miles of here?
There is. There's a drum corps based in Dansville, pretty successful, and it's called. They call them all age drum corps these days. So, they're pretty successful. It's a good outfit. Yeah.
Do you perform with the Binghamton Group, whose name I can't think of? They're in parades. They're based in Binghamton. Bernie Riley is in it.
Oh.
Is the word green in their name? They've marched in the Italian Festival parade several times.
St. Joseph's?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Don't know where I got green.
Actually from Batavia.
I thought it was Binghamton.
Or from that neck of the woods.
Oh, okay.
No, I've never gotten involved with
an
alumni.
Batavia. No, I thought it was Binghamton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Starts with a B. Close enough. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I've never gotten involved.
That's an alumni type group, isn't it?
Yeah. Diehards, old timers.
Well, you're a diehard too.
Yeah, in a different way.
In a different, very much different way. Excellent. So, anything more you'd like to share? Tell us about.
Not that I can think of. It's just, the way I put it, it's something that drum corps really did steer the course of my life. And I feel badly that the activity the way it is now is I have total admiration for the kids that are involved. They perform at a level that we couldn't have even thought of. And in musical terms, they play things that are so complex and require so much skill. And they do it while they're scurrying around on a football field that, it's just really hard to believe what they do. And I enjoy it. What I regret is that it's an activity for a very elite group of kids. And it's not available to, the kid, the average kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way I can say it is I'm just very thankful I grew up when and where I did.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.